It's a huge pleasure and privilege to be here with Akshaya Mukul, the author of Gita Press, which is, I think, a book that many of you will have read because it's now 4 years almost, I think, since it came out, and it's a book that was really a landmark book in that it took a subject which it took an institution that was very important, but that was also not very well known, particularly in the English-speaking parts of India, and really illustrate both told a fascinating story and illustrated, how kind of political and intellectual climate that exists now came into being over the last century. So, over the next hour, I think we're going to talk about the book, a little bit maybe what Akshaya's current and future projects. We'll pause in the middle for a brief reading, and of course, about halfway through, start taking questions from all of you. Now, I wanted to start. So this is a book that it's about an institution, as you can tell from the title, but it's also about individuals. I think one individual in particular, but a group of individuals, and it's quite novelistic. I mean, the opening sentence of the book reminds me a lot of. It's like openings. It's like these beginning of one of these grand historical novels like Middlemarch or the Rudetsky March. Jayadayal Goenka was an itinerant Marwari businessman based in Bankura, Bengal. That's not how your typical Indian history book opens. And Jayadayal Goenka, and even more than him, Hanuman Prasad Podar are the characters and the animating spirits behind this book. So, I suppose I wanted to just get you to maybe summarize briefly with these two individuals as people, and and the kind of their contribution to Gita Press and to the broader Hindu revivalism.
Yeah. The huge contribution. Actually, the man who started it was Jayadayal
Yeah.
Goenka. They were distantly related to each other. And he was the one who was kind of, as you used to say, was caught by the Gita bug, Jayadayal Goenka. And he was like, never liked what was in existence those days, the various translations and all that, and the quality of printing which was happening those days. So he started in 1923 through friends and relatives in Gorakhpur, and a parallel life of Podar was happening in Bombay. And Bombay had to go because of his whole revolutionary experience, because he was a revolutionary along with many others. The famous Rhode Arms conspiracy case of Bengal, in which all of them were caught. And so he was kind of asked to leave Bengal for a good number of years. He could come back only in the 50s, I think. So what happened? Once the decision was made to start Gita Press, which was just to start publishing various versions of Gita, illustrated Gita and all that. Kalyan is the one which kind of changed the game for Gita Press, and that happened because of the 1925 meeting of Marwari Agrawal Sabha in Delhi, in this heat, actually, in April-May heat in Delhi. And there was this whole thing happening among Marwaris with the two groups, these old reformists, and there was those old revivalists. So on one side you had people like G.D. Birla and Jamnalal Bajaj, who were very, very close to Gandhi and were completely imbued with his Gandhian principles. So what happened in this meeting, that one of the speech given was on what has happened, what has gone wrong with the society, and attacking Muslims and various other things, to which Jamnalal Bajaj reacted that, look, if you have to do any such thing, you bring out a journal exclusive to that. Let's not mix up a community meeting. And it was it was a meeting which used to deal with various aspects of the Marwari world, including what was happening with the new generation, how they were being taken to by the Western education, this whole desire to travel abroad, the expenditure in marriages was an obscene amount of money they used to spend in money. So people like Jamnalal Bajaj and all were more interested in reforming that rather than getting into this whole Sanatan business, because the other strand, which Podar, and there was another gentleman called Onkar Mal, one other Mr. Khemka. So these were the people who were saying that the problem among Marwaris in particular and Hindus in general has happened because of this. We had a great classical past which has been kind of interrupted by the Muslims and now the Christians. So the idea is to go back to that classical past and basically saying that, celebrating Sanatan Dharma, bring back the values of Sanatan Dharma. So that's where they decided they'll bring out a journal called Kalyan. There were earlier attempts to do that. Actually, you see in early 20s in Bihar, and there was a magazine brought out by very wealthy Marwaris, and they even got a non-Marwari to edit it. Great Hindi writer called Sipujan Sahai to edit it. But it didn't work because some of the Marwaris again wanted to write, to which he'll say that, look, you can pay money, don't write. Some of you who are good can write, but I'm as editor, I'm going to judge on the value, on the quality of the writing. Anyway, Kalyan started, and within few months, if you see, the success story was like amazing, unlike any other journal of that period, the first quarter of the 20th century. And that's also the time when print has completely revolutionized reading. You have created a new reading public here. There's a new public sphere has been created. But Kalyan, just on the, because it started on a philanthropic model, it said right from the beginning, will not make any profit. We will not, in fact, it was based on Gandhi's advice. They said, we'll not do any book review, we will not carry any advertisement. And even now they follow, despite what might have happened with Gandhi since 1930s. That's another story.
I'm sure they've regretted it many
Yeah,
times over the
they
years.
regret it many times over the years. They keep talking about it. But point is, it was you saw Marwadis from all over India. If you see the early days Kalyan, you will find the list of people who are saying that, we'll take 200 copies, we'll take 500 copies. And by, I think, if you see at the end of first year, it starts in August 1926. By first of, I think, sometime in 1927, they're talking of 20,000, 30,000 circulation, which was unheard of. Only few existing literary journals like, I think, Chand or Hans was not Hans, Chand and all, could kind of think of. But Chand also had a very short life like that, when really the circulation picked up and then they just went down. But Kalyan continued because of this whole larger thing, and also they built a huge collaboration. It was not exercise which was limited to Marwadis. In fact, if you see the writings, early writings, there were Marwadis writers, but they were getting people from all over, and that's where Podar comes in. He was a fascinating man. He was a multifaceted man, despite what his ideological view might have been or was. He was a man who could convince Radhakrishnan to write. He was a man who could write Varier Elwin. He was a man who could convince C. Rajgopalachari. He could write one Mr. in Hunter College in US to write some. And this whole knowledge, I'm talking of, this is 1920s and 30s. The communications were not what is now. And he's writing to them, he's persuading them, he's getting after them. No, you have to write. In fact, in certain cases, even stops printing for a day or two, like he did once with Sampurnanand. And whole galaxy from Malviya to Gandhi to you name it, and everyone was writing. Maybe Nehru was an odd man or who never wrote. And he got everyone, even those who were opposed to this worldview, wrote. Premchand wrote. Just look at the number of Hindi writers who were completely. In fact, now when I'm working on something else, I see many of this private correspondence of these writers. They're saying, "Oh God, Podar is asking me to write what to do," but then you can't say no to him. So someone like Premchand, who was completely, he was far removed from this world. He was progressive, far ahead of his time. He's also writing. He says, "Okay, what should I write?" So he writes on Siva or something. Even Nirala, who was a complete antithesis, although he had begun as in Ramakrishna Mission, he was a complete antithesis of what he stood in personal life. Even he's writing something. Very few people would say no to him bluntly. Very few, very very few. So that was the strength of Hanuman Prasad Podar. He could get everyone, even post 47. Actually, this continues till he dies in 71. Therefore, every time he says he wants to leave, which happens quite frequently actually, because every time he gets into this depression every few years. He says, I want to leave. At one point he says, I want to go and join Salt Satyagraha. Another point he says, I want to go back to some ashram. And his great friend was Ramakrishna Dalmia, who will always bankroll him, take care of him. In fact, when he left Bombay to join Gita Press, in those days they set up a trust for him. It was kind of 10,000 rupees. is a huge amount in 1925,
Mm.
26. And very consciously Goenka he was a quintessential backroom boy who never kind of who will interfere once in a while when he will learn that this man is kind of leaving. He wants to uh, he has some problems. He'll intervene, but mostly he allowed him complete freedom. So if I was kind of if I was of that ideological persuasion, he was a great editor to work with. You just see and he's letting people write. Only thing is that it will not cross the certain parameter. The template would never be violated, whoever you might be. Only once I think Sampurnanand was allowed to. He was a minister, I think he was chief minister then, and he said, "I'm letting you do it, not because you're a chief minister, but because we have known each other for long." And at the end of the article, he did mention that I don't agree with what
Well,
Sampurnanand
there was
said.
also the occasion when they published an article by a Russian in praise of communism.
Yeah.
So occasionally there would be these.
Yeah, occasionally they would
These pieces
do it. In fact, in fact, in recent years, they published an article on, this whole killing of this female infanticide, and where all that this gentleman wrote, when Odar would have scorned to read it. He was making all very progressive noise, saying that whoever says that. Boys are better than sons are better than girls and daughters is wrong. Daughters do better job with their parents and all that. In good old days, if you read Sri Dharma Prashnotri, which I call the best seller of all times, 42 page, and I'm sure if I make any of you read here, all the women here in this room, girls, young girls, I'm sure I'll be lynched if I force it on you. But it started in 1926. It still is selling. Even now, in fact, my Hindi edition is coming up, for which I needed to consult it again, and I could easily get. That's one text which is monograph, which is easily available. So there's this world of Gita Press with it's a multifaceted world of Gita Press has existed in all its forms.
So I mean, the Hanuman Prasad Poddar story is something that is at times even difficult to believe. I mean, it actually begins before his birth, because his uncle, his father's elder brother, is and his aunt are then unable to conceive, and so the inheritance passes to his father, who is then adopted by the uncle formally. So the uncle then becomes a kind of the grandfather, and of course then they have a series of yajnas to make sure that this father is going to the mother is going to conceive, and they consult a god man who predicts that she will be blessed with a son. And then he goes on to say, Motinath Maharaj, the god man, that her son would have 3 distinguishing marks: the holy mark of Sri on his forehead, hair on his shoulders, and a mole on his right thigh. Besides this, the baby would be born with a wire-like object in his mouth, and only after this was pulled out would he cry. And then Akshay writes, various accounts of Podar's birth, published, written, and unwritten, highlight how he was born with exactly these marks, indicating an extraordinary life ahead. So do you believe this, or do you think this is part of family legend?
It's part of family legend. It's part of Marwari legend. What was family legend became Parva. In fact, if you see in late 30s, there's this talk of he having conversation with God. He goes to this place which is now in Jharkhand called Jasidi, and he takes people to a little hillock, and he sees that, oh, I can see the God, and he's having conversation, and people all around him. Some of them also claim that yeah, I could see something moving, and there is a lot. It's all there is. He must have written reams and reams have been written on his conversation with God, and someone like G.D. Birla freaks out. He says, "What nonsense is happening here?" And so Jayadal Goenka tells him, "No, you have to trust him. I don't think he's lying." But this was all part of the larger myth-making exercise of Podar, and it continued right from before his birth till almost his death. People will say, "Oh, he met Narad, he met Shiva, or he met this." So this was huge, and that's why his position was like far superior than many. There were many big Marwari icons of those days, but he had a position very different from them.
2 other aspects of Podar that I wanted to ask you about. One is his relationship with Gandhi.
Yeah.
which is, I think, a very fascinating aspect of this book, because he's attracted to Gandhi.
Yeah.
At some points, it almost seems like he could become a Gandhi Bhakt, as you mentioned. He wanted to join the Sword Satyagraha. They also they diverge, particularly on the issue of caste, and particularly on the issue of untouchability.
Yeah.
And then even when he's a Gandhi Bhakt, he's in the habit of writing letters to other people that are critical of Gandhi.
Yeah.
So what do you think he thought about Gandhi?
See, Gandhi kind of, the earlier, first he met, he was a young boy in Calcutta when Gandhi was returning to Africa. He was a Hindu Mahasabha activist in those days. But over the years, he realized Gandhi was very, very important. But then on caste, which happened in 1932 after the pact, Pune Pact, he couldn't he attacked Gandhi, even personally. In fact, there's a fascinating exchange of letters between him and Gandhi, where he's telling Gandhi, in fact, he was extremely well-read man for that, so he's telling Gandhi that, look, this is what you're saying now, but this is what you said then. And he extracts old pieces of Gandhi from Harijan and other places and say, at one point you said interdining is not good. You said temple entry for Harijans is not good. Now you have changed. But Gandhi, the great thing about Gandhi was that he was constantly evolving, which Mr. Podar was not. And Gandhi said, yes, I did. But now I've changed my position. So what? And so this continues. And in fact, Gandhi becomes a very important part of the conversations from 1932 till Gandhi gets assassinated in 48. For everything, you'll find that Gita Press either has to blame Gandhi, and especially in the 40s, when there's an intense communalization happening from 40s onwards till partition. And you see, Gandhi is like, Kalyan also forgets that it is a journal of Bhakti Gyan or Vairagya, which it claimed it was, and it is attacking Gandhi mercilessly, blaming him for everything. Every Muslim is saved, Gandhi is responsible, or Nehru is responsible. Mostly it was Gandhi. So much so that it ends in an almost tragic way that he also gets up along with 25,000 people who were rounded up after Gandhi's assassination. Podar was one of them. And so was Goenka. And there's this letter between J.D. Birla and Badridas Goenka, where Badridas Goenka is saying that, why don't you get him out? And Birla says, no, I will not, because he was not doing Sanatan Dharma, he was doing Satan Dharma. So, and J.D. Birla had great access to the government, it was a new government, he said, no, we are not going to do it. So it ended in a very tragic. So there is a regret if you find post 48, after Gandhi's assassination, he's constantly, there was nothing about Gandhi. Of course, it was last day of January, so you don't expect February to have anything. March had nothing. April onwards, he just starts this whole long series of his association with Gandhi, going back to Bombay days. Because in Bombay, he was one of those rare guys to have free access to Gandhi. Whenever he would stay in Bombay, Podar had a free access. And in fact, when he wanted to join the Salt Satyagraha in a place near Gorakhpur called Padrona, Gandhi told him, no, don't do that, because tum wahan Bhagwan ka kaam kar rahe. In fact, Gandhi blessed, there's, I think, second or third issue of Kalyan, there is his own handwriting. Gandhi blesses Kalyan, he says, you're doing a great job. I think the whole problem starts with 32 onwards.
There's a lot of contemporary relevance to this, right? Because firstly, people are still playing this game of looking at Gandhi's writings from the 20s and 30s or even earlier in his life and saying, Gandhi thought this, rather than looking at the evolution. But also, I think what this book demonstrates is that, contrary to perhaps the perception today, Gandhi's great debates and the main criticism of him came from the Hindu right. Right, not from the progressive. I mean, yes, apart from Ambedkar, his major political opponents were actually those who said, you're going too far. You're going too far against untouchability. You're going too far in the cause of Hindu-Muslim harmony. Etc.
Everything, abortion, introduction of the new cooking medium, and ghee, this whole ghee versus Banaspati debate, Gandhi gets in there also. Because then they don't like it, because they say, why are you doing it? Because Gandhi also again was changing his position, and he was changing it quite frequently. So they were like, why are you doing this? You are an icon, just remain what you are. What you said 20 years ago, just don't change that. Which Gandhi was refusing to
and
do.
of course, Gandhi has said, if I said two contradictory things, look at what I said later and go by that. But also, Podar is reminiscent of Gandhi in another way, that is stranger way perhaps, in that he has similar obsessions with celibacy and the chastity of women and all of that. But those run contrary to his own personality, his own and his own relationships with women. Most notably with a Muslim woman from a very famous family called Rehana Taibji, which you describe as a Radha Krishna relationship.
So it was actually it's one relationship very difficult to. You don't know if you read the letter. You'll think someone in complete mad, passionate love is writing this letter, and it ends with "Tumhari bahan Rehana Taib." So you're like, hello. And these are not one or two letters. It runs into hundreds of letters that they exchange with each other. They are very much available. This is part of his private papers. And Podar will always tell her, and there was another lady, Saroj, he'll always tell them but that was also norm of those days that you destroy the letter if you've read. But evidently they didn't. Even he did, because his private papers are most of the letters. And she was obsessive about him. She was, she would want his, at times she'll write 3 to 4 letters a day to him. I sorry to many people who actually do understand these things much better, who can analyze, psychologists and all. They said, no, this is Radha Krishna obsession. This is nothing more. Because she's also sending Rakhi. She's very, very particular about sending Rakhis. So these are, certain relations completely, you cannot define them. So this was one. And it falls in the larger, this whole sacred and profane dimensions of love. Very hard to define, but yeah, it falls in that category.
One of the interesting aspects of it, so one of the obsessions of Kalyan and of Podar, which is still an obsession of the Hindu right today, is Ghar Vapsi, as we call it now. But in the case of Rehana Taibji, he was always telling her, I don't want you to convert to Hinduism. I want you to remain a Muslim.
Because one fear which a lot of people told me, which I didn't put in the book deliberately, because somehow I was not very sure whether these interviews, because these are the people who were just, no one wanted to come on record, and you're doing a book, not a news report, where you can get away by doing a few silly things here and there. That he always feared that she wanted to marry him.
Yeah.
And he never wanted her to convert.
And he, of course, was already married.
He was married, and two women used to create quite a stir in Gita Press, and especially in Gita Batika where he lived. One was this American woman, Irene Wolfington, and Rehana Taibji. Because Rehana Taibji had a completely different background. She didn't belong to this world at all.
Yeah.
She had a Western education. She was Badruddin Taibji's daughter. There was a very big family. Father was called Gandhi of Bardoli and all that. So he wanted to keep her at arm's length. And later on, actually, they fell on bad times. That both of them died near Rajghat in Gandhi Ashram, and completely unsung and heard. There's a small little snippet at times of India. This is all people remember.
So in a few minutes, this topic of Podar and Kalyan's views on women is an important one. In a few minutes, we're going to stop for a reading on that. But I just wanted to look. I've got to ask you. We've got to think about the relationship between Kalyan and Gita Press, as described in the book, and what it has, what the broader movement of Hindu revivalism or Hindu majoritarianism has wrought, right? So, because one of the things you see when you're reading this book is how many of the obsessions of the Hindu right today were already obsessions 80 or 90 years ago, whether it's cow protection, perhaps above all, that takes primacy, Ghar Vapsi, as I've already mentioned, Ram Janmabhoomi, Krishna Janmabhoomi, which is the restoration of the Krishna temple at Mathura, the question of conversion, so they're obsessed with Christian missionaries converting Hindus, Akhand Bharat. So a lot of these are, and I was struck reading the book that in part it shows the influence of Kalyan and Gita Press, because these movements have kept gaining currency. But it also shows, in a way, the failure of the movement, because they haven't actually achieved their goals in any of these spheres, right?
Yes, they have not. But the nobility of Kalyan has been that it reaches ordinary Hindu homes.
Right.
Especially in North India, in places like Bihar, UP, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. There's not a single Hindu home where you will ask them and they will not know.
Yeah.
Someone somewhere is reading it. Your grandparents are reading it. Someone is reading it. So you are aware of it.
Yeah.
And it helped. Therefore, RSS uses Gita Kalyan to get its message across. Hindu Mahasabha uses it to get its
Yeah.
message across because it was because of the sheer uh, reach of this journal, and they were the first ones to recognize the diaspora. So in 1934, they were always talking of that they didn't have enough money, but they started the English Kalyan for. So someone I know an author who grew up in Jamaica and all. She said that I remember my grandmother reading it and being forced on us. So this is called Kalyan Kalpataru. It still exists. So these obsessions started, around that time, right from the beginning, and they were the first ones to I lost the train of thought. What were you asking?
I was asking about how the movement the movement didn't succeed in some ways.
Movement also didn't succeed because one of the biggest disruption which the Gita Press people tell you, the assassination of Gandhi.
Yeah.
They said if Gandhi was not assassinated in 48, we would
Yeah.
have won the first election, or maybe the second election.
Right.
That put the Hindu right by almost 30 years. You only see them getting back on the feet in the 70s. The slowly, the
Yeah.
Jansang, and they're slowly getting back with the cow protection, this
Yeah.
great agitation which happened in
Yeah.
Delhi, attack on parliament in the 60s during Indira Gandhi's time. That's the time when they started getting back on their feet. Otherwise, for good 20, 30 years, they were they were in the background.
Yeah.
Despite winning odd elections and doing little bit, they had their pockets. Yeah.
So another thing, there are some important differences I think between Kalyan or Hanuman Prasad Podar and today's Hindu right. So one is I found particularly surprising is on the issue of violence. So Hanuman Prasad Podar never renounces his commitment to Gandhian ahimsa, and at one point he even criticizes the then new Shiv Sena as an example of kind of Gundaism or hooliganism in politics, and that's obviously very different from today, where I think there's the idea that Hindu violence represents a kind of strength or a counter mobilization or Hindu assertion, all of that, and we don't have non-violence is no longer projected as a very important ideal. Another is I think that the focus of Kalyan was deeply spiritual. It's not like Savarkar, say, with his racial or ethnic basis of nationalism.
Yeah.
It's genuinely about a kind of higher plane of consciousness and classical culture and all of that. And I wondered if that has actually been diluted over time.
First thing that you asked about violence.
Yeah.
Except for those 7-8 years of 1940 to 47, where Kalyan actually professed violence.
Yeah.
Because of the Noakhali. If you see the issues of Kalyan after Noakhali, it's completely doesn't look like a journey. It looks like, in fact, British government had to ban Malviya Ank of 1946 because of this whole violence. There are this whole internal, intelligence papers you will find between then Home Secretary Mr. Dayal and others saying that look, we need to do something, and even spreading of fake news about this Bengali woman they're talking about. She was completely imaginary woman who's saying that I have been raped and happened. Then police started hunting for this woman actually. Who's this? How did this pamphlet come about? And they realized there was none. And it was started by Hindu Mahasabha, printed by Gita Press, and it appeared in a span of a month from Gorakhpur, Banaras, Allahabad to Bombay. And that's Bombay police actually said that look, they were the ones who said we are not going to allow this. Although we find that the United Province government then was slightly easy on them. They just warned them that we don't want any of this thing to happen in the future, but Bombay police actually got after them that we need to find out what is happening. So except for that period, you're right, he was not talking of violence. He'll say that okay, leave it, and except but someone like Goenka was not so subtle. Goenka was, in fact, someone says that I'm about to I'm about to be charged seated for something I've done or something. So he says, what did you do? If you did something for the country, it doesn't matter. If you kill someone, I think it was some guy who had done something in the riot. And he says that good, if you're dying for the nation, it's fine. If you kill people, it's fine. Then the people I was shocked to read otherwise is a pretty well-known name in Hindi literature, Ramnaresh Tripathi, also talking of how Muslims look and about this whole, this branding of Muslim tangawalas and all this. So, time and again they were talking, but Podar himself kept away from most of it. Uh, but except for that period, and after Gandhi's assassination, they just kind of completely they went into silence. Also because what their own involvement or allegations against them.
On this point of spiritual, Kalyan being primarily spiritual rather.
Yeah, it has remained. Now it has become more spiritual. In fact, after Podar's death, it just lost its heft. Even now, you won't believe I continue to get Kalyan at home because of all the subscription that I took for God knows how many years. So you will find that it survives entirely on articles of Podar and Goenka even now. They just reprint his articles, and they have very few articles, written now. It's one column. Editor writes once in a while. I've been waiting for what call they're giving this election to voters, which I haven't seen till this one. Maybe the April issue will have something. Because every election they do issue right from 51 election. They issue, they tell the readers what to do, who to vote for, without ever naming a party, but you know who they want you to vote for. So it works very well for that.
Who was in the epilogue? So in April 2014 they issued this.
April.
And essentially what they said was, vote for someone who is dedicated to religion, who is going to pass a central law banning cow slaughter, make cheap food, clothing, and education and medical care easily available, and not indulge in corruption. But if you go back to what Podar writes in 1952, it's exactly the same 4 points. So nothing has changed. Okay, so before we open up to audience questions, I actually wanted to read a small passage about women. So
this is not to scare you people, but to just say that these things do happen. This is about the male child, because this whole onus on producing the male child. You're not woman enough if you have not produced a male child. So, the birth of a male child was not about chromosomes, but the responsibility of the mother. An intelligent, talented, brave, and religious male child could be produced only if she followed some additional rules of piety and self-control. These included not piercing the nose or any part of the body, not touching impure things, not conversing with cunning people, not stepping out of the house without tying the hair, covering the body, and keeping words under check, not eating food served by Sudra, not sleeping with a head towards the north or west, not sleeping in the evening, and not sleeping next to anyone else. In the morning, a pregnant woman was expected to wear washed clothes and worship the cow, Brahmin, Narayan, and Lakshmi. The husband was to be venerated separately with sandal pest, garland, and food items. The regimen for a woman desiring a male child kept getting longer and more complex, curious, and comical. Citing Charaka, Podar said that a woman who wished for a healthy and famous son should have a darshan of a white bull every morning after her bath. As the Hindu Shastras clearly spelled out that whoever a pregnant woman saw in the morning impacted her mind, and a similar child was born. He claimed that a white pregnant woman whose room had a picture of an African gave had a picture of an African, gave birth to a son who looked like an African, and in another case, a Brahmin woman who had seen a Pathan man in the morning became mother of a son who in life became a characterless Pathan. In order to dissuade women from having sex during pregnancy, Podar created the disturbing possibility of this leading to a fetus without limbs. And then it goes on and on. It's like this. In fact, this is a small para about what they thought of women. So this is Goenka. This is the other gentleman. Goenka in his Nari Dharma claimed that women suffered from special defects of body and character, and therefore were unfit to live a life of freedom. These defects were a deadly mix of impurity, anger, obstinacy, lack of intelligence, cunningness, defiance, frivolousness, restlessness, harshness, sallowness, and false daredevilry. It seems that Goenka would go to any lengths to deprive women of their liberty, even invoking the damage such freedom could cause to the nation, jati, and society. And they also call, women utpadan. This is highly derogatory. He basically says that women are meant for utpadan, you know, they're just meant to produce. That's what they're supposed to do, utpadan of children and male child basically.
If anyone's read Reham Khan's book about Imran Khan, some of these recommendations are quite familiar. So yeah, with that, I had many more things I could ask, but we'll open up to your questions. Who wants to go first?
Hi. I really want to know how amiable were people currently working with Gita Press that you probably spoke to during the research for the book, and also how did they respond to it once it was done?
Thankfully, none of his entire private papers are not with the Gita Press, but where he actually resided in Gorakhpur, which is the other end of the city. So they were quite upset that this came out. I did try to talk to them, but even now, in fact, someone recently told me that now they've started allowing, but I had no such thing. They don't allow women inside Gita Press. Beyond that, they have a huge uh, museum. Not a museum, it's a picture gallery. Uh, right at the gate, and you can go, women can go till there. Beyond that, they can't go. But now I met a German journalist recently. She told me that she was allowed. So I don't know, maybe it has changed. But they don't even have women workers. In the editorial, and editorial offices moved to Banaras now for some years, and they don't have women. They were not. I kind of met them few times, but they were not very happy. But cooperative in the sense they said, okay, we can give you access to a library, which is all the old Kalyans, but it's Gita Vatika where bulk of the material was. And after the book came out, they thought that it was, the usual conspiracy theory. In fact, there's a very interesting review of the book which appeared in this RSS website, which is now since closed, which is the only review I've ever read of any book, which was not on the book but on the acknowledgement of the book, which says that a grand conspiracy was hatched to write this book, in which everyone was involved, from Ram Guha to Wendy Doniger to Arundhati Roy. Every name that they saw, they just started to say, okay. So there's this Malvika Kasturi, there's this Kadri Jain in Toronto. Every name that they could say that, okay, look at this is an international conspiracy to be famous. And then,
Do you think it's going to get even more bizarre as the Hindi translation comes out?
Yes, I'm actually worried about it. In fact, I've spent unnecessarily long time pouring through each and every footnotes and digging out the mountain of papers that I had collected. And in the process, it has whole thing has got delayed because I'm really worried now. Because Hindi has a way of saying things can hit you which English cannot. And now people will read, and I'm really, really worried. So every footnote, every letter which I cite, but my only hope is that since they award scholarship of any kind so much, that maybe hope they don't read the whole book. And I have hope that they will not. Because a fat book is beyond that. Any kind. Even their own book. I don't think they will read their own Golwalkar. Forget reading Akshaya Mukul.
Also, I think it's worth saying that the book is really written. It's not a polemical book. I mean, it's a book of scholarship. It's very, very objective, I think, in its treatment. It's only right at the end that you get a couple of sentences that are a bit more opinionated. So I don't think that someone randomly picking through this book is going to be able to find easily find weapons.
Yeah, I know some Marwadis who actually read it, and what they had heard, and when they read this, it's fine. I'm also saying things which Podar did. I'm not saying Podar. I'm not painting him as some kind of a vicious character, which he was not. I mean, there were sides to him which are fascinating. Or I'd love to have him as my editor. But point is that when people pick on few things, they just read reviews, because most of the people who have formed opinion have formed on the basis of reviews, not on the basis of the book. That's where the problem is.
I think for a non-reader, even the title is enough to
Yes,
them.
yes. But that worked in a very different way. I know some, in fact, recently, my wife had gone to meet a minister. She's also a journalist. And in his bookshelf, she found this book. And someone must have gifted it to her, thinking that, oh, Saab khush honge, making of Hindu India, without knowing what the book was all about. So I know a lot of people on the other side also bought the book and tried reading it till they realized, oh God, this is a con job, or this is not for us or something, so they abandoned it.
What's it called in Hindi?
It's Hindi. It's called Gita Press or Hindu Rashtra Ka Nirman.
Huh.
Yeah, it's just a literal translation.
Do you think there's any symbolism between Yogi Adityanath choosing Gorakhpur, the seat of Gita Press, as his?
See, they're two different entities, but they are the two most famous. This ashram, Yogi Adityanath Mutt and Gita Press. Actually, if you get down to the railway station, they're the two bigger. They bring name to Gorakhpur apart from Chauri Chaura for very different reasons, which is again not Gorakhpur, but yeah, not very far from there. So Gita Press is part of the existence and Yogi Adityanath's Mutt. So, and they have always worked in close collaboration. Digvijay Nath was very closely in.
Who is
great friend.
Adityanath's predecessor's
Predecessor,
Yeah.
actually. And he also, actually, with Digvijay Nath, the whole politicization of that mutt started. Before that, it was all inclusive, very comprehensive. It has a fascinating history. It has now, of course, changed completely.
Yeah, since Digvijay Nath, Abhayanath, and Adityanath have all served as members of parliament from
all served,
Gorakhpur, and have also anointed the next
and even the
person in India.
pistol used for the Godse was given by Mr. Digvijay Nath.
Yeah, and Digvijay Nath wrote several times in Kalyan. Yeah, and
Regularly
there
they
are
wrote, they
excerpts from that.
collaborated, they had some land issue in Rishikesh, ashram, which they settled amicably, and they're like. So there's always a choreography happening among these groups. RSS, VHP, good old days Johnson, then BJP, and in fact I've been telling one journalist who's been traveling in UP that using this katha, which happens, which is a big thing, because that's the only source of entertainment, you want to call it, whatever, in the evening when there's a Ram katha happening. And during election time, you find that they're used as for electioneering actually. The candidate will come, and Gita Press plays a huge role. In fact, there's a lot of scholars who have worked on this, but Gita Press plays a huge role because they know these people, they'll sponsor them. Then all kinds of collaborations are happening with Gita Press in that part of the world.
What's the nature of their influence now?
See, what influence is there, not like Podar's time, but I know in UP that you have to reach out to people. They know that through Gita Press, your things will reach the right places. So Gita Press is still very, very important to them. But because during Podar's time, it was his personality which carried, it became synonymous, it was Podar and Gita Press. In fact, a lot of people in my early days when I was researching, they were said that he owned it, which didn't, but it was a trust which ran it right from the beginning. So it has lost that heft, but what it has not lost is its focus. It still remains very focused on these 4-5 issues. It has not, even Sati they changed the issue only of the law got passed. Otherwise they haven't. They still believe that the women should be educated but remain inside the 4 walls of the house. That has not changed. The editor telling me, introducing to his daughter-in-law with some MA from UP University, saying that look at her, this is how an ideal Hindu woman should be, She takes care of me, her husband, and my grandchildren.
Actually, the views don't seem to
That
change.
has not changed. Otherwise, Nari Ank of 1946, which is the annual issue. The annual issues of Kalyan are some treat. This like very well illustrated. They got some of the big artists to work for them. Sarda Ukil, Urda Ukil, that this Ukil brothers here. All of them drew for them. And Nari Ank of 1946 continues to sell. I don't know who's reading it. But someone somewhere is reading it because it's selling.
Yeah, and also, sorry, what?
Yeah.
You say this is at a time when Gita Press, the Kalyan's official position is in favor of child marriage. They're opposed to the ban on child marriage, and that's the Nari Ank that we're talking
And
about.
just a follow-up question: what's the relationship now with the Marwari community?
Very, very good. They still operate out of their main building, the trust offices in Govind Bhavan Karyalaya. It's called in Calcutta. And every time I hear these stories, and a lot of it came around when the time my book came, that Gita Press will close down. That's an old book.
Yeah,
it will
that
never
rumor
close
had
down.
been.
It will never close down because Marwari see it as it's a huge pride, and they take great pride in it.
Even the young people whoever.
Yeah, they might
different
not read it, but they
nationalities.
think that there's a huge legacy of Marwari which you have given to the world, and so Marwari just help. Someone will give, and anyway, the model is very different. Problem is happening in the new age when you have 24/7 television. One staff actually told me that how do we tell our children that I'm involved in a great work of religion? Because he's watching the same television in Gorakhpur as kids are watching in Bombay. He has the aspiration, and the kind of salary is pathetic. You don't survive with that kind of salary. So that's where problem happens. And they have an old problem of labor problem they've been having right from union problem many years. Though they closed many businesses, they closed their shoe business, they got involved in a big problem with their newsprint business because they did some hanky panky there. Then they did even they were in Banaswai in ghee business in a big way. But I think they're very quiet about it. But I think somewhere in the 70s, they something happened. So they closed all that business. But they still run a huge ashram, which is called Swarg Ashram, one of the biggest ashrams in Rishikesh. They have a huge school in somewhere in Churu, I think, in Rajasthan. So they're doing pretty well, and they they had a good business sense when they started this, when they took the land where the press is now, on the entire stretch, all the shops are owned by them. Of course, they pay the usual old rent, they will still survive. They're surviving, they'll never die.
But as you say in the book, I mean, it really was a labor of love to work at Gita Press. I mean, since the employees at Kalyan's in 30s or the 40s were paid 40, 50 rupees a month. And Jayadeva Goyanka says to one new recruit that, if you're going to work here, expect to be in debt. If you want a debt-free life, start a business.
Start a business. Some Nandlal Joshi, I never forget his name. He's writing to him that, look, I want to work and all. Goyanka is saying it's a labor of love, 30 rupees you get. Work, otherwise go do some business. And a lot of people who post-retirement, who have some pension, want to come and work there. So, and all they want is, can I get a free supply of milk or a house to stay? That's all we want. Rest we'll take care of ourselves. So, in fact, early years, that's how a lot of people work for them.
Except when they start the other businesses, they find that people in those businesses want to be paid properly and treated properly, and they're not. They go.
You
the
can't
printing
have
press workers go on strike
factories and not pay the usual wages.
I have a very cliche question. How did the idea come and how did it start?
See, one is that I have generally been very fascinated with the whole story of printing. This whole print technology, this whole reading public. And I also grew up in a small town like Ranchi, where you can't escape something like Gita Press or Kalyan. Someone is reading, someone somewhere. And whoever, so I was always curious who's doing it. And then, someone, when Francisca Orsini's book came, or Vasudha Dalmia's completely fascinating book on Banaras came, where she makes reference, or Francisca also does, Wendy Doniger doesn't. So I kind of started asking these people only that why haven't you people worked? And Vasudha told me that, well, I'm not a scholar of religion, so I didn't work, and she had a point. Similarly, you find that her Hindi public sphere of Francisca does mention Hanuman Prasad Podar in the appendix, and many other characters who appear in a big way in this book. Again, she also didn't work. So therefore I got into it. And I was lucky to get these papers which were like rotting.
Well, I think you also worked to get the papers. I mean,
I worked to get the papers. I had to keep going, and these people don't understand why someone will be interested in his papers. And I had to keep telling him, look, he was a great man. You have to just take care of his papers at least. In fact, I remember those days, National Archive DG was Musirul Hassan, whom I told him. He said, listen, we are willing to send 2 people there. We'll scan in the ashram. They'll keep the originals, but please convince them that this thing should be. Musir was being a historian, was a very, very, he had a very different view. He was not a bureaucrat. So he, in fact, a couple of times he called me, what happened? I said, no, they're not, they are refusing. I told them that, look, two people will come. You don't even, they'll pay for to stay and do whatever. They just show them the document, they'll scan it, and they'll give you a scanned version, and then you can retain the original. Sad, very sad, because at least much as I try to, I made copies for them. Every copy that I made for myself, because they said, oh, you have to do it for us also, which I did. But at least one and a half trunk, which was very crucial last year because of I think the late 60s and early 70s, it just destroyed completely. This is what happens with the tin trunks, and they've been like closed forever. 20, 30 years, no one had opened it.
Yeah, and the other impression was that while reading it and rereading it, it looks like very contemporary. The communal divide.
Yeah, it's nothing has changed. See, if you see the whole argument against Hindu Code Bill, which Kalyan gives, it's same what you hear about love jihad.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. They say, oh, this Muslim boys will come into our house, violate our daughter, cook beef in our house, and walk away with our property. Same. I remember this documentary, this sting operation Ruth Bahal had done, and called me to see it. Whole 3 hours of it, and I said, my God, it's the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, so
Exactly, and this is 2014-15, and just 60 kilometers from here. Western UP, people are talking the same way, or even in Karnataka, that area where they did that sting operation. The language has not changed, narrative has not undergone any change at all.
Just two questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're very fair. One is, I think, this question about the reluctance to, or the inability to understand the importance of documents. On the one hand, there's a reluctance. So, and this is not this reluctance to show documents or what we might call archival materials. It's kind of all over.
I'm facing it on daily basis.
What is it? I mean, it seems to be something. Is it some insecurity?
It's insecurity. Or I've seen in some cases you tell them that, can I have these papers? Suddenly they will fall in love with the papers. They'll say, oh, dekha bhi nahi hai. The moment you ask them, and Basda Dalmia has a fascinating story about a family in Banaras, where she goes and asks for papers, and they said, nahi, hum to rakhe. When she saw the papers, they said, aap barbaad kar rahe isko. आप इसको laminate हो सकता है, आप रखिए, लेकिन please give it to scholars, let it come out. We have this is a mindset. This is a mindset. We don't allow.
Why? I mean, because there has to be something there.
It's a story of, I've seen, I'm dealing with our guest papers. He was ahead of his time, so what he did was, he created a trust which is given all the papers. But many of his contemporaries, if you ask them for letters, there are some letters where you want to see what the other man said. और वो बताते नहीं हम नहीं दे सकते, वहाँ रखा है, यहाँ रखा है, and you know what will happen? They'll just go.
Of course they will. So, and the other question I think is, this lack of change completely. This is such an interesting thing. When I hear this, to me it sounds like a weakness. And sometimes I wonder, is this the strength कि बिल्कुल आगे पीछे नहीं सोचेंगे वही चीज़, they'll just keep saying it so that I don't know, what do you think? What is it? Is it can we hope that it's a weakness?
I hope so, but no, it's not. Actually, if you see, it's been happening for so long now, and it's become so much part of our consciousness. A lot of things that we see happening now, the language hasn't changed, and post 2014 something else has happened. कुछ हुआ है कि, और जो लोग ड्राइंग रूम में या प्राइवेट कॉन्वर्सेशन में भी जिन चीज़ों से बचते थे, अब वो धड़ल्ले के साथ कहते हैं और कहते हैं मैं कहूँगा और आपको जो सुनना सुन ली। और ये मैंने पहले नहीं देखा था। हमें पता था कुछ दो लोगों के बारे में, दोस्तों के बारे में, रिश्तेदारों के बारे में कि ऐसा सोचते हैं, लेकिन they also kept away. There was some लोक लज्जा जिसको कहते हैं, अब वो नहीं है. Now it's like with impunity, they're proud of it.
Exactly.
Go to hell.
Yeah,
You are in a hopeless minority. You are the one who talks like this. So, and I have seen relationship break, which is very unfortunate. Things are just going haywire. I don't see any hope immediately.
But so some of one of the things you documented in the book is that their obsession with Western education, and that's a battle which they lost. For example,
That's a battle
completely
they
lost,
Yeah.
including among the Marwadis.
Yeah.
Who are all adopted.
But now they have started doing, they've changed the time. In fact, someone should write it, which is, now you see what is the whole NRI Hindus.
Yeah.
So जैसे कि इनको देखिए ये IIT से पढ़ के और यहाँ से पढ़ के भी they are more संस्कारी than what you guys doing here. Even the DU and JNUs of the world has destroyed you.
Yeah.
So they have found a new constituency now. And then they're doing great. The Rajiv Malhotras of the world and everyone is doing a great job.
But it's a very important point on the reluctance to part with archival material. I think it's also to do with the fact that in India we have this view that the dead need protection, and the dead still have rights. And we're worried about this whole Izzat business where I don't want my ancestor to be portrayed in a negative light. And we're actually kind of afraid of the truth being out there.
That is there, of course. Recently, in fact, he was a very big Hindi writer. I can't name him because I've been trying to convince his daughter to part with some of the papers. And the other day, he WhatsApped me a very inane letter, which is nothing. Which is one of the letters you can do without. I said, "Is the only letter you have?" He said, "I'm still thinking. What will you do with them?" I said, "What will I do with them? You will keep the letters. In this day and age, I'll come with my phone, I'll click, and you keep the letters. I'm not carrying them." But still, she's not, he might have done certain things. But what she doesn't know that already I have enough things which we still not feel good about, once it comes out. But that's not the idea. The idea is also to see what was happening, what was he saying. And that entire, this generation, we are living in very strange times. I see a lot of letters and conversation happening in the 30s and 40s. I think they were far ahead of us. They were leading fascinating life. They were far more bohemian. We're nothing. In fact, if you talk to Dhanbir Bharati's wife, the kind of tales she's told me, or like nothing. She says also, you guys are useless. You guys should just go and commit suicide. Nothing you guys have done. She's like one of those, she talks a lot. And actually, when you see the letters and kind of things which were happening, unbelievable. But there's a great reluctance to part. Only I think someone like Akshaya left on. I still want to know a lot of letters of what Nirala, what was he doing. His letters are there, but not all the letters are there. God knows where they disappear. Because some of these people would not address each other with the choicest of abuses. It was a different world. They were discussing, great ideas were being discussed. They were taking on people, ideas, which is not happening now. And no one wants to give it out.
I was wondering that there's this idea that, this violence against minorities is justified to a certain extent because it's in self-defense to protect this kind of identity. So I was wondering, did it already exist decades ago, or this sort of idea changed in relation?
No, it's been there since the early part of 20th century. This whole competitive communalism, and every time you'll talk to Hindu Mahasabha people, they'll say, "Oh, that this usual 2-3 things that they had in the 1920s."
I always wondered why this idea of defensive violence came, because Hindus were in majority and they had like a lot.
They're still in. You don't know of any majority. They're so insecure.
Also, at least 100 years ago, it is true that Hindus were, like for example, Lajpat Rai was a minority where he was. Whereas today, Hindus are the majority everywhere.
Everywhere. Including Wayanad, which, whatever these people are saying. So, I don't know. This all started in the 20s, and these groups from Gita Press to Hindu Mahasabha to, they kept it alive. And now you have a full-blown Hindu government.
But talking about how does our future look, and with your deeply insightful book, which reads very contemporary, but then the silver lining is that we had a more secular government to an extent where secularism was inserted in the preamble of the constitution. So they came with this kind of strident Hindu politics we see from 2014 only. It may be a passing phase actually.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. When I talk to people, and people of our kind of class, our kind of background, I'm not. I don't think it's a passing phase. The way what is happening in schools. This Nadia Aram's book is so scary and so and even now when the Balakot, all these things were happening, immediately you heard in Noida and Gurgaon and Delhi schools, kids just saying. I have been asking when my daughter was in school that do you have any Muslim festivals at all? We don't. Schools don't do. They have Christmas. They have all of the Diwali, Holi, all that happens. It's never part of that. Not that they exclude Muslim children, and these children, mind you, this Modi is talking a lot about the 18 the children who are going to vote for the first time. These are people. Most of them are either at home or few of them have gone to universities. But for 18 years at home, most of them have heard something else. So they want to vote for him. In fact, I'm not very hopeful of that. This whole generation, which is going to the new voters. But very few children at home are hearing something else. Otherwise, how do you go? How does a 5-year-old kid tell another classmate that you are from Pakistan? Go. I don't know where it's coming from. We also went to school. It was not happening.
My question was, so this is primarily we're talking about caste Hindus who are engaging in this kind of stuff.
Yes.
What are the low caste or the non-caste Hindus thinking?
See, Gita Press was there was a bit of ambiguity about Gita Press, what it did with this. The question that you asked about these lower castes, the Harijans. While they said that temple entry is not for you, and the reason given was that you did something in your previous life for which it's a sin of your previous life, therefore you're not born the caste Hindu. But they made these texts available to them. Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the small Ramayana, everything was available.
It was available.
Yeah, they were available. But that's where the problem came in. So you use them. So it was easy to politically rally them, to kind of get them. Let's say कि आपको रामायण पढ़ रहे हैं, गीता पढ़ रहे हैं. नहीं तो otherwise just see the fierce debate happening with Gandhi on temple entry. Much later in the 50s, in fact, after post-independence, Podar had to write a tract on Devghar temple, which is a historical place, and where Gandhi had a famous thing on. In Bihar, something very unusual happened. The chief minister led a delegation of Harijans into the temple, to Devghar temple, and the Brahmins freaked out. And Podar is the one who wrote a long monograph on this, attacking it. So with this ambiguity, they have been they never bothered about them much. The kind of epithet that they used to Ambedkar, he'll say, Heenavarn, Dr. Ambedkar. And with Ambedkar, they had particular anger because of the Hindu code bill. They thought it was his conspiracy against caste Hindus.
Yes, and while they normally don't endorse political candidates, in 52, Podar explicitly says, vote against Ambedkar, I hope he loses.
And two people, Ambedkar and Nehru, they got Prabhudat Brahmachari to contest against Nehru in full vote. And they made mass appeal that please vote because this Hindu code bill has to be. And they created this whole bogey that Hinduism is in danger. Because of this whole why. And daughters, शादी हो गई, अब आपको कोई मतलब नहीं माँ बाप से. Giving inheritance to daughters is like unbelievable. They said, every child, parents have to spend some money. बेटी का शादी में जितना खर्चा हो गया, उसके बाद you have no right on parents' property or any wealth or anything. So they have been not cared at all about this thing. They have been very disdainful of the Harijans, the lower castes, except the slip service of providing the text.
Podar himself has some interesting, as you say, he's often ambiguous, but he does say in his exchange with Gandhi that, the focus should be on uplifting the Dalits, right? So for example, he says to Gandhi that even those in favor of dining with Dalits agree that they cannot be considered pure until they have a pure bath, wear fresh clothes, give up alcohol and meat, or at least stop feasting on dead cattle. Only then co-dining makes sense. But your common dining and temple entry movement is not even checking if they have fulfilled these norms. So there is this kind of sanitizing tendency that, okay, they have the chance even in this life to become more like us. Then they can maybe be uplifted in that way.
So it makes me wonder that are we actually deluding ourselves that this is what an average Indian really believes? And we are a very small handful who believes otherwise. Because what you're saying is very right.
You must have seen all around you, in families, friends. This is now come out, and suddenly people you didn't know till 2014 were so rapid will now come out, which is unbelievable. But you can have a different point of view. You can. Secularism has 2,000 problems, which I agree. But for that, you don't have to justify the other thing. How does that make it right? Just look at the whole narrative around this candidature of this Pragya Thakur.
So I just wanted to tell you something. There's these problematic positions, for example, of what pregnant women should do. I've read something very similar from a very unlikely source, almost identical, which says that the mother should have portraits of saints and famous people up on their walls so that their children can be like them. And this comes from the mother, the associate of Sri Aurobindo, who founded Mothers International School, and the booklets that parents are given to prepare for their children's admission to the school explicitly says that these are the norms you should follow. So,
why does that school booklet have like a thing for expected?
Well, you're asked as a prospective parent, you're actually asked questions whether you subscribe to the philosophy that the school believes in. And fortunately, no one ventures into this.
More or less, that was narrative of those times. Even now, some of these groups and sects and
people still
societies,
believe.
People still believe. Absolutely. For them, a lot of people find the idea of woman working late into pregnancy is completely, because you go to office, you meet all kinds of people, what are you doing? So this is completely alien to them, these concepts. A lot of people,
In some ways, one reads about Kalyana and thinks that things were actually better because these were intellectually serious people. They read books, they were engaged in intellectual debate, and sometimes they would even have profiles of Christian and Muslim saints in their pages. And you think that, okay, well, actually, these today
you could engage with them much better than the present lot. They were much better than the present lot. You could engage with them. They could, you can tell them. You can disagree with them, in fact, and normal, sane conversation could happen. No longer.
Violence was not there.
No, violence is far away from violence.
And both are certainly believed in engagement and in debate.
They believed in engagement
and all of that.
That's true.
Okay, I think that's there's nothing else. Thank you, Akshay, and we're all looking forward to your new next book on I think you might have guessed it on again. Thank you.
Okay.